I'm Tom from Do-It-Yourself Home Automation, and if you've ever looked for light bulbs, you've probably seen something called color temperature. And you may see this on LED bulbs being compared to CFLs or to the original incandescent. A lot of people really like the old incandescent bulbs, even though they were terrible in terms of energy use, because they had this very kind of pleasing light. People liked something about it. And what they usually like about it is the color temperature. So color temperature is basically just, when it's applied to lighting anyway, telling you the kind of color that the light has. So obviously all of the light you're going to be getting from a bulb, you want it to be white, but there's going to be different kind of shades of white. And this graphic here kind of gives you a sense of the different color temperatures you might see in a light bulb. So color temperature is measured in Kelvin, the absolute temperature scale, and generally the range that you're going to see in light bulbs is somewhere between about 2000 Kelvin, so all the way down here, and as high as maybe 4000, 5000 Kelvin. So what do these numbers actually mean? Well, on the lower end of the spectrum you can see here, as you get down into the 2000s, you're going to have this kind of reddish, orangish hue to the light. And as you get further up into the higher range, up around maybe 4000, you're going to have a much bluer, kind of brighter light. And really the difference here is just the fact that when you're at these higher levels, it's kind of more of a sterile, bright sunlight type of look. And when you get down here, it's more of that kind of traditional yellowy, incandescent glow that people found kind of pleasing. So when you're looking for bulbs, you want to look at what your own personal preference is and the kind of application that you're going to be using the bulb for. So for a family room, maybe you want to have somewhere in the lower color temperature here, so maybe around 27 Kelvin is kind of a standard light that people often choose. And that approximates that nice yellowish glow you would get from an old incandescent bulb. But if you're looking to light, a hallway or something like that, or you want to light an office where you're going to be concentrating more, you're going to need maybe a little bit more, a little bit of a bluer light, then you want to go for something in the higher Kelvin range here of color temperature. So 4000 is kind of a standard value when you want something that's more of a sterile light and a little bit more kind of oriented towards concentrating versus relaxing. So you can choose along this spectrum depending on your own personal preference and how much you want your light to look like an old incandescent around this part of the range, or as you get up higher, that kind of bluer light. Obviously you don't want to go too high, you don't want it to look like a hospital or something like that, but choose in that range. So what are some other color temperatures just to give a sense of the higher end of this scale? Well, the sun is somewhere around 5700 Kelvin. So it's all the way up on the much bluer kind of side of this spectrum. So that's why if people are choosing what sometimes is labeled as a sunlight bulb or something like that, it probably just means that it has a much higher Kelvin value for its color temperature. It's more like the color of sunlight. And as you get lower down all the way around 2000, the reference is a match flame. So that kind of old-timey light you would get from a candle or something like that is going to be on a much lower part of the scale here. So some other kind of interesting things with color temperature, you can often, with certain kinds of bulbs, actually change the color temperature on the fly. So in some other videos I've talked a little bit about the Philips Hue bulbs. And they're really cool because you can actually, with their app, dial in a color temperature, and they call it, I think, like a light recipe or something silly like that. But you can choose a color temperature from all the way down in this lower range where you have these orangey, yellowish kind of light, all the way up to the much higher range, in the 4000s, where you're going to have that more sterile, bluish kind of light. So if you're really indecisive and you can't choose a color temperature for your bulbs, then Philips Hue, if you don't mind spending $60 per bulb, is a great option, because you can always go in and change your mind at a later point in time and switch to a different color temperature. But again, when you're choosing bulbs, I think there's no right answer necessarily. Just think about what you want, what the particular application is, and then choose your color temperature accordingly.